Welcome to the Money20 Countdown webinar. I'm your host, John Lunitz. Today, we're going to be discussing some of the major themes in this year's show and what it means to your brand CX. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the audience for joining today. I'm looking forward to a lively discussion, and I'm amped about this year's show in Vegas, being in person, and the 10-year anniversary. I do hope to see you there. To help me unpack and discuss the insights into these CX strategies and how they help your brand prepare for these major inflection points as you move from startup to IPO and beyond, I'd like to welcome Senior Vice President of Business Development at IBEX with a concentration in Fintech and crypto, Mr. Brian Larimore. Brian, welcome.
Thanks, John. Glad to be here. You and I attended this show, I think, 2 years ago in person. Last year, we couldn't, so it's going to be really exciting to get out and see people and move around Vegas and hopefully make some new relationships. Thanks for having me.
Oh, sure. Thanks again for being here. I'm definitely looking forward to getting in a little bit of trouble with you in Vegas, too. Hey, if we're looking at 2021, I mean, this has been another year of frenzied disruption and innovation, right, in the fintech and crypto space. And I think this is best reflected in the IPO market, right? We started in January with a firm and have moved throughout the year with other IPOs with Toast and Coinbase and Robinhood, just to name a few. And I think this is really significant because just a few years ago, these organizations were startups and in some circles considered thought leaders, and not by all. And now today, these are significant players in the space with multi-billion-dollar market caps.
Absolutely. And as they mature and as they become public and under increasing scrutiny, what we're finding on the back end of that, and from a CX perspective, is a lot of scrambling around and working frantically to improve both their internal operations and then also to either work with their outsourcers or even add outsourcers. Because with the increased publicity and so forth comes more regulation, more requirements to service their customers better through various channels, in particular a live channel. A lot of them haven't had a live channel yet. That becomes an immediate requirement and a completely different scaling event for them. So the IPO market has had a tremendous impact on it.
I agree. And you make a good point, right? These organizations, pre-IPO, they're being judged on what their growth is. And as they become public, they're now becoming judged on what their profitability is. So that's a huge change on their maturity curve. And what happens along that maturity curve, and that what we're finding across a lot of the startups, is that they're spending their time, their money, and their effort, as they should, on their disruptive platform, right, or their disruptive technologies, but they're not really spending the time on their CX strategies or even taking into consideration what that end user experience looks like. And I think that's reflected in the market. We'll see, and you see all the stories in the media and the newspapers, et cetera, right? You've got these response times that are being measured in months rather than hours, right? And in some cases, your point about live ops, there's no way for customers, and they're expressing their frustrations because they can't get a hold of anybody. And this is very concerning to them, especially when you're trying to move money in a timely manner or purchase a stock or take advantage of a market fluctuation. And unfortunately, in some cases, we've even seen lawsuits, to the extreme. And as these organizations move from nascent into these public organizations, I also understand that you actually have a nice product, a first-time outsourcers guide that would help them along this journey. Could you talk about that just a little bit?
Sure. We put this together to be able to show companies that are either thinking about outsourcing, maybe they've already outsourced with one company, but that are looking to get into how to outsource and how to do it effectively and how to not get taken advantage of out in the market, because there's a lot of sales hype out there and so forth. And so how do you cut through all of the chatter to get to the right systematic approach to evaluating the process of outsourcing, so that at the end of the day, you're effectively choosing a partner that's going to be able to grow with you and that's going to be able to expand with you and meet your needs. The worst thing to do is to end up with a partner that you're incompatible with. And now, in addition to not being able to expand your CX strategy, you're also now in the process of evaluating another partner and getting rid of a partner. So these are typically long-term relationships that are mutually beneficial. And so the guide really helps walk people through that process and how to do it. We'll be happy to give you one if you come by the booth at the show. Speaking to your prior point, though, about a lot of the companies in the fintech space focusing on their core disruptive technology and some of the impacts that's had on their back end not being as well developed. For example, we have a customer that recently came to us, and had developed this unique payment processing technology, mobile devices, obviously, in an entirely new sector of the economy. It's payment processing, but it's in a very niche, very large niche, actually, in the transportation sector. And they had overlooked a part of their process because across their customer base, not everybody's going to be able to leverage the technology, and not everybody's tech savvy. And so there's an entire section of their industry that's paper based. And so they ended up being weeks behind on processing certain documents, and were falling further behind. And the unfortunate thing is, without processing these documents, they couldn't get paid. So that was going to have an incredibly negative impact on their financials, their ability to grow, and so forth. So they brought IBEX in, and we put a team of people on it. And within weeks, we had caught them up to speed, and now they're processing all these things in real time. So that's just one example among many that are out there as these companies make these transitions from, rapid growth, hyper growth, and moving into a much larger scale.
Great. I mean, it sounds like a terrific example. And you talked about, some of the things that are in this guide and questions to ask and to move this hyper growth organization along a process. In addition to the process, I also understand there's certain types of technologies that are utilized to help facilitate this, right? Especially from a live ops standpoint, or even a back office standpoint and fraud ops. Could you talk about some of the technologies and things that you were able to utilize and implement with this client or another client?
Sure. Two of them come to mind. Our floor management system is a fully integrated management system that is online and digital, and we have dashboards, and it allows the operations of the floor operations people to be able to notice any kind of inconsistencies in the way the transactions are happening. They get notified when an agent has a question. It's a fully integrated suite of services that allows us to get maximum efficiency out of each transaction, whether it's live or not. We combine that with training simulators. We're very good at designing training simulators to improve efficiency in training, to faster education, with the goal being to achieve faster proficiency. One of the things you'll hear IBEX talk about a lot is speed to proficiency, because that's what our focus is delivering as fast, the highest level of proficiency as fast as possible to our customers. And so the training simulators do that, and they do it with another advantage, which is cost savings, because what we see a lot of times, especially with the new Fintech organizations and newer companies, is that we can oftentimes, through the use of these training simulators, reduce the overall training length. And what that does is it saves money, number one, but it also saves time. And so it helps with proficiency, it helps with driving fast ramping speeds and so forth. So those are just two that come to mind. And then we wrap this around a business intelligence and knowledge-based system that allows all of this to go into our quality organization and our knowledge organization. And they do Six Sigma analysis on this information. They do Gemba analysis in some cases, and it feeds information back into our operations. It's a closed loop system that allows us to basically do defect reduction across the operations. And what we find over time is that, again, it's all geared towards driving faster proficiency, better operations, and cost savings.
Interesting. You brought this floor management system. Really takes me back to my days at Citi, right? So when we kind of started in this business, I can remember walking around centers, whether they were in the U.S. or somewhere overseas, and if somebody had an issue or some type of escalation, and I think today, actually, in my opinion, floor management system maybe needs to be rebranded a little bit to escalation management system. But if somebody had a question or they needed something, right, it was one of these numbers, right? They raised their hand. And then, we thought we were becoming extremely sophisticated because we had a paddle system, right? And you had different color paddles depending on your question, whether that paddle was green, yellow, red. And I think we even invented at some point an orange paddle, right? And so that was, from a floor walker perspective or a manager perspective, was helping coach and, field questions for the agents. It was like, this was the degree of severity that they needed help on based on the color of the paddle. And so that in and of itself, right, was interesting from a floor management system, because it was, you were quickly able to get from the manager to the agent to the customer. But what it left out, and, something that you hit on that kind of struck a chord for me, is the aggregation of that data, right? Because this floor management system, really what it's doing, it's taking all of that data and it's aggregating it so you can see what those questions are. Because I can remember at the end of the day, we're like, okay, so you've deployed X floor walkers and you've got Y information, but what were they talking about? And the day was so hectic and frenzied that nobody can remember, right? And so if you wanted to do that, what did you have to do? You had to deploy another product or another process within the center that said, okay, you guys start ticking. Like you guys need to make tick marks on what you're doing. And this was basically would come back and we can say, what the customers are calling about. Or at the time calling, there was not a whole bunch of chat at the time. But now today with this floor management system, right? And I think you bring up a good point, is that that's become a little bit more sophisticated because now all of this information that's coming into your centers is being funneled into a centralized database, right? And then that database can tell you why they're calling. Is there a problem with your website? Is there a problem with the product? Is there a defect? I was talking to a guy, I don't remember, it was last week or something. He was talking to me about these guys buying multi-$1,000,000 or multi-$1,000, Lego sets with all of these pieces, but one piece of the Lego thing was missing. And then they had to go find out how to get that one, So if you're buying some Millennium Falcon Star Wars set, piece number 2,912 is missing. I mean, that's crazy. Like, how would you ever figure that out? So, by being able to aggregate this data, centralize it, and then bring it back into, whether it's your leadership, your training, your frontline ops. I do think that is, very powerful,
right,
from a closed loop process, right?
You can also do some interesting things with the data from an external perspective. So we have a sister organization that has a program that allows us to go out and survey agents and develop an agent profile. This uses vast amounts of publicly available information that's there. We also we combine this with other databases that can track a customer. And so what we do is we match the best agent with the best customer profile. The objective with that is to be able to deliver a better overall experience because the agent profile better matches the customer profile. And we see that being a very powerful tool in improving CX overall.
And what's interesting too about that, right? We've talked about floor management system, right? We've talked about this match system. We've talked a little bit about the simulator system too, right? On being able to create these, whether they're synchronous or asynchronous learning, so that the agents can go out and maybe even do micro learnings. It's interesting because the technology, right, at the end of the day, it's really more an enabler. There's no single solution here. It's about trying to figure out what combination of products for your front line that will really end up then impacting the customer experience.
Absolutely. And what you can't leave out of this whole equation, though, is the focus on the call center, on the contact center. And because that's really where the rubber meets the road with this. And so one of the things that I would do if I were evaluating an outsourcer or evaluating whether to outsource or not, but as you're in that process, is to discover where the companies you're talking to are making their investments. And what I mean by that is at IBEX, our focus is on investing ahead of the business. And so for one example of investing ahead of the business to deliver a better CX result is what we call Wave Zero. And so at our expense, we bring in all leadership and operational management. It includes trainers, it includes QA, it includes site management, site directors, and we've trained them ahead of the agents. And the purpose for doing that is multifaceted, really. But the big thing is you want to have, if you're going to drive proficiency in the contact center, you need leadership that is experienced. And so this gives our leaders experience in the training. They take live contacts for 2 weeks afterwards. Then we rotate them into the training class with their existing agents. So there's a bonding experience that goes on so that they're learning each other, and there's a bit of a hierarchy there because the leaders have already passed the training, taken live calls and so forth. So they're at a proficiency level greater than the agents so that they can then actually help the agents. And so what we find that this delivers for companies is a faster proficiency curve. And so our objective really as an organization is within 30 to 35 days to deliver above network proficiency levels. We call this bar raising. And so when you're evaluating an outsourcer, you're going to want to find out, is this a bar raising company? Are they going to invest ahead of my business, my fintech business, in order to deliver to me an above network level of proficiency? Because if that's not the objective, then you're hurting yourself and your network proficiency is going to go down. So the objective should be for the network proficiency to continue to rise. And so at IBEX, our invest ahead of the business strategy, an example of which is Wave Zero, will deliver that level of above network performance faster than probably anybody else in the industry.
And that Wave Zero, that's a global platform, correct?
It's a global operational process. It's not a platform. It's a methodology. It's actually a mindset. You could actually say it's a philosophy, um, because what it comes out of is our desire to focus on delivering top of the scorecard performance as quickly as possible, fast proficiency, speed to green, top of the scorecard performance, and that differentiates IBEX from a lot of the industry. I would say that a lot of the industry leaders, the bigger companies, the larger companies, they're delivering to the middle of the scorecard. And it's almost like they cannot help themselves. It's so ingrained in their philosophies, in their way of operating. Their senior leadership is so far removed from their operations that it's almost like they can't help but to deliver mediocre performance. And so a differentiator for us is to deliver faster proficiency, and deliver a better CX experience as quickly as possible.
I'm with you, and I completely agree. Hey, so just we've been talking a lot, right, about the technologies that are internal, some of the business intelligence, again, that's internal into the centers. The one other points I'd like to make and kind of talk through, which is a theme of the show, right, striking digital gold, is taking a little bit more holistic view too, and looking at some of the information that's basically in the external environment, right? And I'm actually going to be on the Spark stage. You can come see me on Tuesday morning. I'll be talking about
Good luck.
social rep. Oh yeah, thanks a lot. Well, there's a 2-drink minimum if you want to come see me.
Okay.
But it's on social reputation management, and one of the things that is really kind of an untapped market is that all of this information that is out on the web and all these platforms, right? I saw a stat from Gardner that was by 2023, I think it was, that 60% of all customer service engagements and interactions are going to be done via some type of digital channel or web and self-service. And I think that's extremely significant, not just for 2023, but for today, right? Because
Right.
organizations are just not basically, it's a listening post, right? This is unsolicited and untapped feedback. And one of the things we're going to actually be talking about there on the Spark stage, and come check it out, is we're able to aggregate feedback from all these social media channels, whether that's Twitter, Facebook, Google Play, Trustpilot, et cetera. But more importantly than being able to aggregate the data, what we're then able to do is analyze it, just a lot like you were talking about earlier with the business intelligence, and then take action on it, right? And so what's important about the action and the aggregation and the analysis is that it ends up showing trends, right? And the trends themselves are what these customers are talking about in the external market. And it's very important to understand if those trends match what you're seeing in the internal market. Because these external trends, it's very interesting, the product, because it actually puts the trends into a sentiment and a category, right? So the sentiment is what you would think it would be, right? Is it 1 star, 5 star? Are you a happy face? Are you a sad face, right? Where along the curve was, your perception of this engagement? But the other thing it does, it puts in this feedback into different categories. And these categories can be around quality of product, it can be around pricing, or it could be even around the quality of service, which is very important because a lot of things that are coming under the internal center, if you're having problems with your center itself, you're not going to find that out until you take a survey after the fact. And some people don't even do that. So by taking the external and bringing it to the internal, we now are able to create a profile, right, for these organizations that show, hey, if you really have these limited funds to invest in your CX strategy, because your focus, right, is to be able to move from growth to profitability. And along that curve, you're spending all of your time, your energy, your money, and your really intellectual capital on this, disruptive platform or technology. This will really be able to help you hone in on the best use and the best place to figure out where to get an ROI for your investment in your CX strategy.
Absolutely. And I think in the near future, it'll be ubiquitous to use these kind of services. We have a separate division that handles that on an outsourced basis. We can manage this function for you. Works very good. But you absolutely need to be able to do trend analysis and evaluate all the different channels that are out there and what your customers are saying, and to understand that and be able to react. The key part of that's to be able to react part. And that's where I think a fast outsourcer, an outsourcer that has the ability to move quickly, should be part of every fintech's overall CX strategy, because we build things into our systems that allow us to move fast. We train leadership ahead. We give leadership experience. For example, we will, during peak events, which we have because we deal with a lot of peak retailers, we will elevate, we will isolate, we will identify, we will train leaders in advance. We will then bring them up to speed during peak events. They will actually do leadership positions and management positions. Some of them will stay and some will go back into the agent pool. We do the same things with trainers. We do the same things with QA. So at IBEX, we always have a large bench strength, almost a hidden bench strength within our organization of leadership that we can elevate into these, when these peak events happen, whether they're crypto events or there's some financial turmoil or there's just some other event that happens that requires a rapid scaling process, and we have the leadership in place to be able to elevate that. For example, earlier in the year, we had an event in one of our Philippine locations. It's actually a provincial location, which is a really special, unique spot. IBEX has actually come onto this island in Bohol, Philippines, and actually we can point to changing people's lives. A lot of our agents, we were the first BPO on the island. For a lot of our agents and their families, we offer health care to 4 different family members. It's the first time that somebody's family members have ever had health care in their entire lives. Okay. So it's just a really special place, and it's across from Cebu and so forth. So the question, one of the questions around Bohol was, could we scale there proper? Could we do rapid scaling events in Bohol? Well, in the past 12 months, we've had 2 events that have happened there. One was with the cryptocurrency company with a massive change in demand, and we scaled over 500 people in over 5 weeks there. We were able to scale up to 500 agents and get them proficient and get them, at network levels and so forth. That's a huge amount of agents to scale in a 5-week period. We're also in the process right now with another financial services firm. We're also scaling up for peak up to over 600 people in this one location. So you're not able to do that with proficiency unless you have planned for that. And so when you're evaluating outsourcers and when you're looking at who can be a partner and you're planning for these type of scaling events, you need to look and have them prove to you that they are prepared to be able to manage to these type of events.
I agree, and I think you hit on a real key point, right? And then that point is, probably anybody can hire, but few can scale with proficiency. And there's a huge difference, right? And the difference to be able to scale to proficiency is really what really drives that certainty principle when you're looking for the right strategic partner. Because if you're going to be making if you're going to be making an investment in your CX strategy and you want the partner, you do not want to be doing it 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times to get it right. You want to get it right the first time. And so, the difference between just putting belly buttons in seats versus to actually to scale and then, not only get the correct hiring, training in the labor pool, but to get those people proficient in the 30, 60, 90 days, as you mentioned, it's critical to the success.
Yeah, and I think that gets down to an entire company's philosophy of operating, to be quite honest. We at IBEX, we like to say we have leaned in leadership. And that basically means that there's a short distance between our level and the CEO level and decision-making level, which means we can make fast decisions. But beyond that, we also take pride in offering frontline leadership's engagement. And so, for example, I had a call this week with a large client of ours, large online retailer, and he was explaining to me, he started off the call kind of in an unusual way. He said that when he first walked into the first IBEX call center he'd been in, this is nearshore location, that he immediately knew that there was a difference and a specialness about the site. I was kind of taken aback. It was actually unsolicited on my part. And so, but he went on, he said, we were in the meeting. He said, your leadership were engaged. They were focused. They were leaning forward. Nobody was doing emails or chats or Skypes or whatever. He says, in comparison to another partner that he works with that has actually had the business longer than us, it's a similar business as tech support, different LOBs, but anyway, much larger BPO. He says he's in there with the country manager, and he says half the people were doing Skype calls, half of them were texting, multiple people doing emails, and he said he had to interrupt the entire call, a meeting, in-person meeting, just to get their focus on what his needs are. So, we take a lot of pride in focus on keeping our, having frontline leadership at the top and frontline leadership highly engaged in our customers' business.
Great. Hey, again, I just want to thank the audience for joining today. Brian, thanks again for your time, your passion, your examples, and I can't wait to spend a couple of days in Vegas with you.
Same here. Thanks, John.